Saturday, January 1st, 2022, New Year's Day. At 0800 hours, an MQ-4C Triton drone takes off from Guam Naval Base headed towards the South China Sea. Triton is the US Navy's counterpart to the more famous MQ-9 Reaper of the US Air Force, a highly capable unmanned aerial vehicle, or UAV, specializing in long-range naval surveillance. Today, this UAV is headed towards an archipelago in the South China Sea, known commonly as the Spratly Islands. A collection of islands and reefs, the Spratlys occupy a strategic location overlooking some of the busiest shipping lanes in the entire world. These islands are contested and disputed by several countries. If a single country could secure control of this vital artery into Asia, they could obtain an enormous amount of geopolitical and economic leverage over rivals. And should it come to that, choke off all shipping and access. Over the decades, a number of Asian countries have issued a claim to the Spratlys as their territory. The Philippines, Malaysia, Taiwan, Vietnam, and perhaps most significantly, China. China has undergone a rapid process of economic growth and industrialization in recent decades. As the emergent regional superpower, China seeks to remake the balance of power in the South China Sea with itself in the dominant role. Once one of many contenders in the area, in the last couple of decades, the military strength of China has steadily risen to eclipse all other local powers. As you probably have been hearing, in recent years, China has drastically stepped up its activity in the Spratly Islands. Their military has been busy reclaiming land and building facilities in an attempt to strengthen their claim. As of late 2020, China has built airfields on 3 of these islands and additional facilities on 4 others. These islands allow Chinese forces to intimidate nearby shipping and aircraft. Now, there is one last country I've neglected to mention so far. The only superpower with the force projection capability to challenge China in the Spratlys despite 8,000 kilometers of distance. I am speaking, of course, of the United States of America. The reasons why Chinese and US interests have diverged in recent years are complex and beyond the scope of this combat simulation. I'll encourage you to do your own research. As interesting as geopolitics, historical boundaries, and global trade dynamics are, they aren't the focus of this channel. Just note that the US does not believe a China-dominated Spratlys aligns with their own interests, and wants to see them off. So with all that out of the way, back to our drone. Our Triton's mission is to survey the islands ahead of a planned freedom of navigation operation by a US littoral combat ship across these contested waters. As the surveillance drone approaches the islands, it is picked up at 300 kilometers by ground radar installations located on Fiery Cross Island. Military air traffic attempts to establish contact, warning the drone to stay out of Chinese airspace. These warnings are ignored. Due to increased diplomatic tensions, Chinese surface-to-air batteries have been stationed on a couple of these islands, and the missiles are now readied. The drone had been ordered to skirt around the island and survey its facilities. During this tense standoff, a Chinese SAM operator spooks and an HQ-9 missile is fired at the US drone. Our drone detects the targeting radars and attempts an evasion, and fails. As the remains of our drone falls into the water, Chinese and American air bases light up across the Pacific with activity. Chinese J-11s are dispatched to the scene while the Americans scramble F-16s to the location of the downed drone. Already we see distance and geography at play. American fighters must be accompanied by tanker aircraft in order to arrive on station with fuel to maneuver. Chinese aircraft can operate from closer basing, which makes aerial refueling less of a factor. Both forces arrive near the island almost simultaneously and a tense standoff ensues. Fighter jets buzz each other angrily with their target acquisition radars as they circle the area. This time around, it is the American pilot who spooks. In the heat of the moment, he fires off an AMRAAM missile. Let's freeze our simulation. The events up till now have been scripted in a way to trigger an accidental war. What you are about to see next is a hypothetical operation that has been wargamed using the actual military assets available to both sides. 2 associates of mine will play as opposing generals, each given supreme command of all forces on their respective side. For Team China, we have callsign Jester, And directing Team US, we have callsign Halcyon. Jester has been ordered to hold these islands no matter what, and Halcyon ordered to take these islands no matter the cost. I've instructed our generals to play their part as two warmongering maniacs with no regard for human life and hellbent on escalating this war. Should be fun. A few things to consider before we begin. Any weapon system in our simulation must have reached at least initial operational capability as of the making of this video. Here are some of the more prominent weapon systems which might see action. We will not attempt to simulate prototype weapon systems which may or may not be operational in a few years' time. Currently, our rules of engagement only allow for air-to-air engagements. As the war escalates, the rules of engagement will become increasingly permissive. The generals will be conducting their battles under a realistic fog of war with imperfect information. Intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, or ISR, about the enemy must be gathered before their status can be known. As an example, this is what Halcyon sees of the Chinese forces at the beginning of our simulation. The next part of this video is made after the simulation has been conducted. Any tactics, engagements, combat losses, blunders, and the final outcome of the simulation are unscripted and incorporated into the video as the results stand. Not even I know how the next part plays out until after the battle. Any minor changes that are made are done for the sake of readability. Oh, one last thing. Combat losses have a permanent effect on future scenarios in the Spratly series. For example, if one side were to somehow lose half of their available fighter aircraft in their arsenal today, this would strongly influence their ability to conduct future air operations. Both Halcyon and Jester will need to carefully consider where and how they deploy their limited assets. With all of that out of the way, let's start our war. Unpause. The AMRAAM comes hurling across the short distance towards J-11 Duelist. Radar warning receivers on the Chinese fighters begin screaming in response to the missile launch. In an instant, all fighters on both sides let loose missiles on their adversaries. Chinese J-11s are larger aircraft carrying double the missile count of the F-16s. However, the smaller F-16s have the claim to being the more agile fighter. Given so little time and space to dodge, the first volley of missiles decimates both sides. The extra missiles carried by the J-11s never get a chance to be used, the extra weight actually slowing them down. The lone remaining F-16 gets into a turning knife fight against the last J-11 where it excels. The F-16, callsign Gambit, comes out on top. Chinese island-based SAMs have radar track and begin launching missiles. With no time to think, the F-16 kills altitude going as low as possible. Gambit knows to get under the radar horizon of the ground-based HQ-9s, where the curvature of the Earth will hide him from targeting radars. Skimming just a few dozen feet above the ocean surface, he begins to make his way out of there. Gambit threads his way out, maintaining distance from known SAM sites while keeping an eye on his dwindling fuel gauge. That previous engagement has used up more than a quarter of his fuel, and he doesn't have enough to make it back to base. Luckily, he knows to head towards incoming reinforcements, which includes a pair of KC-135 Stratotankers for aerial refueling. Once out of range of HQ-9 missiles, Gambit climbs back up to higher altitude, where the thinner atmosphere means that his remaining fuel will take him further. Just as Gambit is about to fall out of the sky, tanker aircraft are just able to catch him and top him up. This is going to be a major theme in this sort of conflict. The distances in the Pacific are vast, and the logistical ability to keep your fighting forces armed and refueled will play as large a role as any new aircraft or weapon system. Let's send Gambit along his way. The man has earned his paycheck today, and probably some PTSD therapy. Meanwhile, 8 American F-15 Eagle air superiority fighters push on ahead. They are supported by an E-3G AWACS plane to provide improved radar coverage. The Chinese counterforce is 8 J-16 fighter aircraft. J-16s are derivatives of the older Sukhoi Su-30, the Soviet Union's answer to the F-15 during the last days of the Cold War. Despite being designed with each other in mind, these two aircraft have never encountered each other in combat so far in the real world. They are about to do so here. Airborne early warning aircraft provide radar tracking as both sides approach the islands. The previous fight has removed any remaining ambiguity. Both sides intend to get within weapon parameters and unleash missiles. American fighter aircraft have traditionally held the advantage when it comes to beyond visual range combat. For decades now, the latest advanced medium-range air-to-air missile has held a range advantage against missile systems of potential adversaries. This may no longer be the case anymore. Each Chinese J-16 is equipped with 6 PL-15 missiles. The PL-15 is a new long-range design built specifically to outrange AMRAAMs. Current estimates puts the practical range of the PL-15 at 95 nautical miles, 20 more than the latest AMRAAM-D variant. That's the number we'll use for this simulation. Fighter aircraft size each other up, neither side willing to back down. Team Halcyon is well aware of the possibility that Chinese J-16s have the range advantage with their new missiles. He opts to charge in his F-15s on full afterburner to cover the 20 nautical miles of range difference as fast as possible. J-16s unleash the first volley of missiles, lofting them high up into thinner atmosphere for maximum distance and begin to crank. Let's introduce the concept of the crank. To crank is to maneuver beyond the effective range of enemy missiles while still keeping within the maximum gimbal limit of your targeting radar located in the nose of your aircraft. You do this to continue providing up-to-date guidance information for your missiles as they burn towards a moving enemy, while simultaneously forcing the enemy missiles to maneuver, bleeding limited fuel and kinetic energy, decreasing the possibility that they will hit you. This is the crank, combining both factors into a single concept. F-15s get within range for their own counter volley. Moments afterwards, the PL-15 missiles go pitbull, activating their own radars in the terminal guidance phase. The F-15s are forced to break off their crank in order to dodge, diving into thicker atmosphere, trading their altitude for speed, dragging enemy missiles as much as possible, and deploying chaff and electronic countermeasures. First volley of missiles wreak havoc on the F-15s despite evasion efforts. Remaining F-15s steady themselves and resume cranking, directing their own missiles into the Chinese J-16s. American AMRAAMs hit with effect, doing significant damage despite starting from a positional disadvantage. The AMRAAM is still likely the smarter missile, with better avionics and a cooperative engagement capability, allowing each F-15 to direct missiles launched from other F-15s. Chinese missiles have not yet demonstrated a CEC capability. Losing situational awareness of the parent aircraft that launched it is destroyed. That first volley, however, is an enormous disadvantage to overcome. Chinese J-16s launched their second volley of missiles while still going high and fast. The American F-15s, by comparison, are forced to launch their second going low and slow, having just spent all of their altitude and speed dodging the first wave of PL-15s. The Chinese missiles come in hard, rocket motors burning against the energy-exhausted F-15s, easy targets. Meanwhile, each AMRAAM is now forced to make the climb back up to altitude and speed, and get to the J-16s completely spent, with no energy left to maneuver. After splashing the last F-15, Jester gets 2 of his fighters to go full afterburner, hunting the American AWACS and tanker aircraft currently hightailing it out of there. However, as he gets near Philippine airspace, he has to reconsider. He's not sure if additional forces could be coming at him just outside of Spratly radar coverage, and his J-16s are burning what's left of their fuel to catch up. If a new challenger approaches now, his pilots will have nothing left in the tank. Also, shooting up support planes over Philippine airspace is probably unwise. Jester decides he doesn't want to risk a two-front war 5 hours into the conflict. He calls off the chase and gets his pilots to come home. That was a sharp encounter. Multiple simulation runs of this particular engagement go 80-20 in the J-16's favor when they are allowed to carry PL-15 missiles. Recent developments in the People's Liberation Army could very well be an answer to conventional US fighter technology. We'll get to see later if the PLA has developed a response to more recent US military innovations. To close out this day, we have to go back to the beginning. Today's sequence of events was sparked due to a planned freedom of navigation operation by a US warship challenging Chinese claims to the area. Needless to say, that operation is cancelled, and for the last 5 hours the littoral combat ship has been sneaking its way out, hoping it's been forgotten. It has not been forgotten, and some keen-eyed viewers may have noticed that a Chinese AWACS plane has been shadowing the warship for a while now. That warship hasn't been completely harmless. For the last several hours, it's been providing radar and electronic intelligence on PLA aircraft flying nearby and relaying that information to the US Armed Forces. For Jester, this is no longer tolerable. Jester orders an airstrike using JH-7B fighter bombers equipped with the YJ-12 anti-ship cruise missiles. The bombers depart from Hainan Island and are directed towards the target by the Chinese AWACS plane. The littoral combat ship concept is rather infamous in military circles. These warships have been marred by technical issues, and the first of these vessels is already being slated to retire after less than a decade in service. More than just technical issues, I suspect that the US Navy is coming to terms with the fact that the LCS concept is simply not suited to warfare against a peer competitor. There is a reason why all other modern US warships are equipped with the Aegis anti-missile defense system. We are about to see why. The cruise missiles come in low and fast, skimming just 30 feet above the waves, hiding behind the curvature of the Earth until they are spotted by the ship's sensors at 10 nautical miles. CRAM and Phalanx systems mount a valiant point defense. With the sinking of a US warship, the last attempts at a diplomatic resolution are broken off. Though no one can say that they've planned for this exact scenario, neither is conflict totally unexpected. Contingency plans come alive as both nations grind inexorably towards war. Carrier strike groups cruise the waves above as nuclear submarines prowl the depths below. Fighter aircraft patrol the skies fervently as bombers ready themselves along the runways patiently. And beyond it all, the steady gaze of satellites, vigilant and watchful. To anyone who has made it this far, thanks for watching. I'm going to expand this concept episode into a full series if there is enough interest, so please like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. You may have noticed that all the units in the simulation have unique call signs chosen by and representing friends. Unfortunately, I don't have quite enough friends to fill out the roster for a second episode, so if you want an aircraft or warship in the next video under your chosen call sign, leave a name followed by your call sign in the comments below, and a unit bearing your call sign will appear in the next video in a few weeks' time. I can't guarantee how well your aircraft or warship will do. Your unit may lead a long, successful career spanning the entire series, or be shot down by the first enemy missile fired. That's not up to me, that's up to the simulation. This war is going to expand rapidly, and will easily need a couple hundred new call signs just to simulate a second video. So if you're interested in bolstering the ranks of the HypOps army, volunteer for service in the comments below. A shout out to the developers of Command Modern Operations for creating this amazing warfare simulator that makes this video possible. You can find the game on Steam, so check them out. We're also starting up the HypOps Discord community to complement the YouTube channel. If you're interested in discussing the latest military developments, current geopolitics, or just an update on the next episode, check out the HypOps Discord channel. Eventually, I hope to draw on the HypOps community for pilots and captains to command individual squadrons in a more realistic command structure in future scenarios. More details to come later. I've left the Discord link in the description below. That's all for now. See you next time.